we're going to move to a panel discussion. Our topic, sovereign AI, how a national constraint turned into a global opportunity. Our panelists, Taha, Benssiba, Head of AI for Europe, South, Middle East, and Africa, Oracle. Raymond, Siva, Senior Vice President, Digital Investment, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. His Excellency Savannah Maziya, Minister of Information, Communication, and Technology, Kingdom of Eswatini. And our moderator, Nawied Jabarkhyl, Head of International Media Relations, APCO. Please help me welcome our guests.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Very happy to be here with an expert panel looking at sovereign AI. This is one that jumped out at me on the agenda just because of the important role that governments around the world are playing. We're hearing a lot in recent years about the development of AI. It's not just private corporations. If you look at the estimates, they do vary. Bloomberg Intelligence says the generative AI market alone will be worth $1.3 trillion by 2032. About $400 billion of that will be spent on training AI models and the development of LLMs, large language models, which we've heard a lot about today. A lot of that money is going to need to come from governments. Businesses can't do this alone. So it'd be interesting to hear just why AI is becoming a key priority for governments around the world. There are also challenges as well. If governments become involved, can they be trusted to regulate a technology and develop it at the same time? What about the ethics and the sustainability if 193 plus countries around the world are looking to get in on the act? The panelists' names are above you, so I think we'll just jump straight into the conversation. I'll start with you, Your Excellency. Eswatini, the Kingdom of Eswatini, a fairly small landlocked country, a population of just over 1 million people. A lot of people might look at it and say, why AI?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate being hosted by you folks. We are a small country, and in a sense that people do ask those questions. But my answer, I used to be a business person until December of last year, and now I have this position. My answer is why not? If you look at a country like Dubai, the Emirates are very small population. If you look at Singapore, you look at other countries, we look at ourselves as actually being at the corner, at the sweet spot of opportunity for the continent. The continent is known and understood to be, in the next 50 years, having 2 billion people, of whom over 60% will be under the age of 35. So we see, instead of constraints, actually, in Eswatini, we see opportunity. In our own country, for example, our population of 35 and under is 70%. So everything we're doing and all our target marketing and all our regulation is really based on that market. We are building an environment that will enable all these young people to be able to create, develop, innovate, but also ensure that whatever they're developing and innovating is not colonized, but has sovereignty, is respected, and has patents, and is able to travel the world and network them with the rest of the world and be able to be bought and sold or whatever that's required around the world. So we see ourselves as a kingdom of opportunity and a kingdom that is waiting to burst out and be like other players in the sector.
And we'll delve into the idea of legislation a bit later on in the conversation, because it'd be great to understand the infrastructure you're putting in place, especially as your plans are in their infancy. I'll come to you next, Taha. If you can just give us a wider view, sovereign AI, for those who may not know exactly what is it and why is it growing in importance?
Sure. So a more commonly accepted definition of sovereign AI, it's a nation's ability to control the development, management, and utilization of AI in accordance with its own customs, rules, values, and for its own benefit. So if we look at it from that angle, it's no different than why virtually every country today will at least want to have some form of sovereign media, because your ability to carry out, to be able to carry over to your population and to your citizen, to your residents, a source of information that is aligned with your society's cultures and perspective is essential, even though everybody could get access to just foreign media, right? Foreign media exists everywhere. Yet still, every country sees the importance of doing that. And I think the reason why it's important is that we've all seen the astonishing valuations for all the AI companies. We've all seen how much investments goes into AI startups and AI companies. And for a lot of countries that want to see a future-proof, sustainable path to develop their countries outside of, say, fossil fuels or mining or any of the legacy industries, the high-tech industry comes up first, and AI is currently standing at the peak of the high-tech industry, and that would explain a little bit why it's not just relevant, but it's important, and why virtually every country today strives in one way, shape, or another to be able to develop sovereign AI capabilities.
Thank you for that assessment. Raymond, Malaysia, a very different country in terms of where it is compared to the likes of the Kingdom of Eswatini. Digital economy featuring very heavily already. Just give us a sense of how much of the current economy, a major one in Southeast Asia, is dependent on digital services, and what your plans are moving forward, and why it's a focus as well.
Nawied, thanks for having me on the panel. So let me just take you back to 28 years ago in 1996, where there was a game-changing initiative called the Multimedia Super Corridor, right? So that really was meant to add complexity to our economy, which was largely oil and gas manufacturing and commodities. So 1996, we literally, designated a 66-kilometer corridor from the Twin Towers right onto our airport now, which is in Putrajaya, the administrative capital, and really got all the tech giants inside, right? So everybody from Oracle to Microsoft, Bill Gates was on our IAP all those years ago. And that really ramped up our ambitions towards getting into a knowledge economy, ICT, if you can call it that. And 2010 onwards, we saw the internet economy coming in, so the likes of Alibaba, Tencent Cloud, all the big giants, Meta and all that started coming in, because we had muscle memory, right? So the word startup, when it wasn't even put out there, Malaysia was a startup hustling for VC money, and getting the companies in there. Fast forward to now, so from a 0% contribution to GDP in 1996, as of 2023, we're 23.2%. Right, that's significant if you compare to what oil and gas is giving to Malaysia or the commodities, right? The target under the My Digital Blueprint, or the Malaysia Digital Blueprint, is to have the digital economy contribute 25.5% to GDP. And I think we're well on our way to do that. You may have heard recently as well, due to the political stability and the improving economic sentiment in ASEAN in general, Satya Nadella was in Malaysia, announced a USD 2 billion investment into the AIDC. You have ByteDance from China, 2 billion. Google building out their AIDC. And more to come. So it's raining data centers in Malaysia, more specifically AIDCs. Now the reason is because we have to now reinvent what a digital infrastructure could look like, right? And that's really very important. And you cannot run away from saying this infrastructure would be based largely on GPUs, right? That's how it's going to be. The CPUs are out of it, right? So NVIDIA has announced a partnership with YTL to support a 4.2 billion USD investment into the Grace Blackwell GB200s, which will put Malaysia, or we will have the largest supercomputer in the region. By Q1 of next year, would have that, right? Now, to build onto that, then we need to look at cybersecurity, right? Infrastructure without resilience, cyber resilience is going to be pointless. So thinking about how we bring the NOCs, the SOCs into Malaysia, BlackBerry has announced their COE in Malaysia, Siemens has a SOC. And you have infra, you have cyber resilience, and the third thing you need to do is talent, right? So that muscle memory over the last 28 years, we have that. There's a good flow of talent. I must say our neighboring countries are benefiting a lot from that. Singapore has got 1 million Malaysians, driving that economy forward.
Yeah.
We've got to think about how to retain them here. But more importantly, and I just want to make this point, is sovereign AI. It is key on three areas, right? The first one is data sovereignty. Every country really is now thinking about data sovereignty, data privacy, right? So it's not just about compliance to GDPR or your PDPA. It's about a country's national security. So data security is number one. Number two, I think you need to look at your cyber security resilience. If you look at cyber warfare, that's how it's going to be conducted, right? The amount of phishing scams and other attacks on sovereign countries makes it really important for countries to look at that. So that's number two. And the third one is technological independence, right? So you have no choice. If you're looking at where, if I may say China, US, or whatever, you've got to be sure that you have the capability to not just depend on the big four or the big three.
Yep.
You need to have some control and leverage your own knowledge, right? So these three things, I think, will be
are crucial. And Malaysia, by the sounds of it, very advanced in terms of that wider infrastructure. But a lot of the countries looking to do this, Taha, are not necessarily, they don't have the resources or they don't have the talent or the infrastructures, as Raymond was touching upon. Is it key for them to look for a unique selling point that they can have? If you look at the Global AI Government Readiness Index by Oxford Insights, you mentioned Singapore. The US is ranked first, Singapore second, UK, Finland, Canada. The UAE is doing a lot. It's first in the Arab world and 18th internationally. But what's key for governments to try and all around the world focus on when looking to find their place in the global AI race?
I think it makes a whole lot of sense when you also look at this from the perspective of what would it bring you, right? It is a significant investment. Forget the capital expenditure needed to acquire all the infrastructure, but you're going to need to probably define curriculums in universities that will be oriented more towards technology than they would be, for example, other parts of the STEM field. You're probably going to have to reallocate resources and build your electric grid in such a way that you're able to support this very power-hungry industry. And I think the reason why a lot of countries are still very bullish about this is because they realize the opportunity still far outweighs the initial cost of that investment. I kind of always like to find analogies that say it has always been a very expensive and a very long project to say we're going to actually build a refinery when you can just go and buy the refined, insert whatever good you want, right? It's a 10, 15 years of construction where you're not seeing any revenue. But these are macro investments that are made by countries for the sake of prosperity for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And today, and I think I've heard this today from a number of the panelists, there is no obvious technological trend that everybody agrees is going nowhere. There's no way today that AI is not going to be just more prominent in our everyday lives. And being able to capture that opportunity and be perhaps not always a global leader in that domain, but at least you can have, you could have the aspiration of being a regional leader in that area. You want to be the place that attracts all the talent within all the neighboring countries. You want to attract both the academia and the tech companies that are looking to set up centers of excellence, are trying to set up AI data centers in countries where they have access not just to very high quality power, but also access to skills and access to knowledge. But also, I guess that a lot of the time, a lot of the countries realize that nobody's gonna be the custodian of their culture, of their history. There's only country X is the only country that probably cares about preserving the poetry of that country in the 80s. Everyone else will go, look, it's great for us to have a few excerpts, but not necessarily to really maintain that. And if you want your history to be told in 20, 30 years to your grandchildren from your lens, you've got no choice then to build your own sovereign AI capability, because you cannot necessarily trust some big tech somewhere in the world to accurately reflect what your country was all about in a given period of time.
Is that a consideration for you, that sovereign element, Your Excellency, when you're looking at building this in 20, 30 years' time for Eswatini to look very different than it does today? Are the people on board with that, and how important is that element of ensuring that the infrastructure in terms of people and talents is there, but that also this has the buy-in of people on a national level?
I would say that people are ready. I think we've been late as a government. And so we're going to be delivering for people who are very ready for what we want to deliver. I love the discussion about the issue of niche. We're a small country. We cannot do everything that other big countries can do. You know, we come from an extractive environment, from mining to agriculture. But it would be very expensive if we do not invest in the AI space and ICT space. It'd be expensive for us not to look to see it as something that will give us more independence and relevance. Otherwise, if we don't invest right now, it'll be too expensive in the future. It's a huge consideration also as we're looking to be able to be a lead in the region. And we are seen now as leading. I mean, even our education system is now geared into STEM to ensure that from K through 12, we're introducing that before you even go to university. We're also geared on ensuring that even our healthcare is that way focused. I mean, we're leading in that particular sense of how do we use AI for healthcare? How do we use AI to predict certain casualties or pandemics or whatever that will affect our society? So we're excited, and we're really thinking that. The fact that we have not gotten to the market like the UAE or whatever doesn't mean that we're not going to. But we also understand that these are not things you do alone. And so we're very excited to be able to be working with the UAE in looking at collaborating in a variety of areas. So we don't have to recreate, the wheel in certain issues. But we do see that the issue of sovereignty is very important. It's critical for us to be able to be safe, and also not only just to be safe for ourselves, but if we're going to be maximizing and dealing and providing data centers, which is where we're going to really lead in the region, we have to be able to market that safety for others around the world who want to consider us as a place to be able to store their information.
And the basis of this model, essentially, as you've touched upon, is to try and make Eswatini a base within Africa to connect the continent in the future. How concerned are you about the ability of your regulations, your legislation that you're developing now, to be able to be palatable and transferable across a continent as varied as Africa?
You know what we're doing that's really wonderful? We are not doing regulation from a government point of view. We're actually doing regulation in consultation with business. So I think sometimes when governments regulate, they only think about governmental issues. So we're trying to really ensure that business is part of that regulation space. It's difficult sometimes to understand regulating this space because all of us don't know what's going to be happening in the next 5 years. We think we know, we think we understand. So we want to be able to get regulation that's flexible, that is able to change with the times, but that is able to keep information safe, citizens safe, but also whoever is an investor to feel comfortable to invest. We do not want to regulate as other countries do, and regulate people out of the business or regulate people to the point where no one can be able to invest. It's important for us to be able to work with all the stakeholders to regulate in a manner that is conducive and mutually beneficial.
And the geopolitical aspect, Raymond, just to come to you, Asia Pacific is feeling that perhaps more forcefully than any other part of the world now, this showdown between the US and China. How does a country like Malaysia, which traditionally has enjoyed cordial relations with both sides, as the pressure turns up, as we've seen in other parts of the world as well, particularly around tech and the digital economy, how do you insulate yourself against future threats?
So when ASEAN was set up all those years ago in the 1960s, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, one of the key principles was ZOP, the Zone of Peace, Freedom and Neutrality. And so ASEAN has taken a stand to a large extent and still has that stand that we will remain neutral. Right? Drilling down to Malaysia, we're a small country. We're about 34 million people, rich in resources. But we were the first country to recognize China under back then in 1971. Right? So we established diplomatic relations back then when it was no go. And I think the government now, under the leadership of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, has reiterated that fact that we will remain neutral. He just came back from Russia 2 days ago, and I say it openly, right? We were in the US, he was in the UAE a couple of times already. So it's really important to ensure that we separate tech business with what's going on in the world. And you know how strong Malaysia is on the stand of Palestine, for example. It makes no bones about that. But business will have to go on. So when it comes to tech, again, on the national sovereignty, it's really important, again, to stress the data sovereignty. Now, data is now key. If you don't have control of your data, and you're putting in on, for example, Microsoft Cloud, Google Cloud. What happened recently in one of the Middle East countries, if there was enough political pressure to say, let's turn off the tap, cut the cables and the data, what's going to happen? Right? It is real. And so we need to think about how do we then maintain data sovereignty and yet be part of the global, village, so to speak, right? It's good to have all this DEFA, the Digital Economy Framework Agreements and all the rest, but the reality is that you need to have control over your data. It needs to be there. And regardless what the big tech says, it's your sovereign country, it's your patients' data, it's your citizens' data, it's your government data, right? And I cannot stress the fact that cybersecurity is also very, very important. So you see, when we talk about AI, it enables and emboldens the good actors as well as the bad actors. And the bad actors are more motivated than the good actors. So it cannot be a reactive defensive play. It has to be a proactive. So you've got to use AI in the context of your own country to see how do you predict and stop and try and mitigate perhaps and react to all this negative, also using AI to attack you, right? So that has to be thought about, and to that, technological independence. So the argument here is, for example, we've got 5G, right? We rolled out 5G with Ericsson in 3 years. And according to Okta, we've got the highest speed, lowest latency of all the networks. But Huawei is already talking about 6G. And you will see that at MWC Barcelona next year. I think they will roll out 6G. The UAE ambassador, who I had the real pleasure to meet in Malaysia last week, is saying, forget fiber. 6G is next. Like, Ray, don't focus on dark fiber connectivity, right? Just go straight to 6G. But that's a Huawei technology more than an Ericsson technology. So what do you do? Right?
Lots of countries around the world won't be able to use that because of bans that they've brought in against Chinese technology. Some would argue down to direct pressure from the United States, but it highlights the geopolitical tensions around technology. Thanks for that, Raymond. Taha, I just wanted to pick up on that issue. There is a apprehension, if you like, in many parts of the world, and Oracle works with governments all around the world who are looking to boost their sovereignty. There is an apprehension with the government having a bigger role in all of this data. We hear a lot about the importance of data driving the future, data being the new oil. What we're hearing on the panel is that essentially the government may be the right people to hold the reins on this from a sovereign perspective. Why is there that disconnect, and how can it be overcome? How can people be persuaded to get on board with this?
Well, I think there's one of the good arguments for why government should be able to play a more prominent role is that governments have historically always done things for much longer term benefits than private companies who, if you're public, you got shareholders, you care about Wall Street says, you think quarter to quarter. Whereas governments will generally be able to go, we're doing this not for the glitz and glamour of a PR announcement, but because this is something that will serve a purpose for a much longer term. And to a certain degree, we can all be thankful to the fact that there's still a lot of industries that are still heavily tied to government, right? You don't necessarily want to trust defense, for example, to excessively to private industries because, well, if there is no war, then there is no money, and a government is okay with having to kind of arm itself to prevent an issue from happening, but it's okay with having to potentially never to use those assets. Private companies might think differently, and that might cause a situation where you're conflicted between doing what's right broadly and doing what's right for your stakeholders. And I think the reason why trusting the sovereignty of AI and trusting sovereign AI in general, and trusting government more with that, is that yes, this is a much longer play. This is about you being able to safekeep culture, you being able to safekeep knowledge, you being able to train and develop your people so that they become less dependent on external third parties, more self-sufficient, that they're able to compete. And I think there's also another argument where to say, today, if you do not have, as a nation, if you do not have an experience with sovereign AI, to what degree can you really have an informed opinion in the global space if you have to debate global regulation of AI and what can be done and some of the pitfalls. If you've only been a consumer of AI that was built by a third party, you don't really have the depth to be able to have the informed conversation.
That share of voice, yeah. And it's an important consideration, I think, for many countries, as we're hearing from Eswatini as well. One thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, Your Excellency, was just how important that leap is when you don't have the legacy problems that, say, a country in the West may have had. How beneficial could that be for countries like Eswatini when you don't have the landline telephones, for example, that need to be upgraded, that existing infrastructure? Does that mean you're better placed to really capitalize on the AI opportunities?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a leapfrog situation, as you just talk about landlines in Africa and cell phones, and that jump, and how we're like the highest users now of cell phones in the world. It's also an opportunity to look at what others have done, where they may have failed, and see how that can be tweaked for us to make it better. It's also one of those things where we're really, really focused on ensuring that our own people are developing their own software for solutions for ourselves that can then work for the rest of the world. So it's a blank script. It's really a great opportunity. And we're finding it's a great place for us to be able to also collaborate, because that enables us to be able to see, when it's a blank slate, what we can do and not be fixed into one relationship that we cannot get out of for whatever reason. So for us, it's exciting. For us, it also gives us the opportunity, you were talking about regulation earlier, to regulate in a manner where we take the good from where there's good and leave the bad. Because what we've seen also is, as I said earlier, we come from colonization, so things have been sort of pushed down to us. This particular space will give us the freedom for that sovereignty. It will give us the freedom to be able to guarantee ourselves and other people who are working with us that we are working for the greater good. Because what we don't want to do with AI, especially with our cultural positions, we don't want to change who we are. We don't want to become someone else. We want to be part of the world, but still ourselves. We want to be part of the world and still be community-based, because we will always be a people that are community-based. We don't want to lose that. We don't want to have, old people who are neglected and young people who are raising themselves. We want to be still in the community, still cultural, but enabling and using AI to be part of the world and to be better and to grow our economy. But it's important that the sovereignty is always top of mind. It's important that the safety, cybersecurity is always top of mind. But it's also critical that we're always able to see it as being part of the globe, but not changing who we are, because it's so important to still be a community. We do not want to lose that.
That's a really important issue, perhaps a fourth pillar to add to the three that Raymond touched upon, the cultural appropriateness of having that sovereign AI focus to ensure that it works best for your populations. There's one final issue I wanted to touch upon. Before I do, regulation is something we've heard about time and time again. Regulation and ethics, a key feature of the first Dubai AI and Web3 Festival. But looking at regulation, we just heard from His Royal Highness on stage saying he wasn't that hopeful of potentially the world coming together on this. We've spoken about geopolitical tensions. Raymond, if I can start with you, whose responsibility is it going to be to try and do this? We've seen countries like the UAE, South Korea, US sign a pact, but realistically, the main players around the world need to come together on this, or should businesses take a bigger role in self-regulating?
That's a million-dollar question right there. Right? How do we do this? So we're looking from the point of actually the different angles to look at it. So one of the approaches that we're taking is, why do we look at the harmonization of standards, right? So under ISO, you've got, I think, about 30 standards that talk about data, regulation of data, and so on and so forth. The IEEE has just put out standards as well. So if we harmonize these 42 plus standards out there, and this is just between the ISO and the IEEE, then you would have minimum standards, global standards, that could be applicable throughout the world, right? Most of the countries are members of ISO as well as IEEE as well already. So if I take it from that point, then could there be an approach different from the EU AI Act or the Biden's executive order that we can take and say, there's a Malaysian or there's an ASEAN sort of approach to how we want to look at, firstly, standardization, harmonization of standards, right? That sets the baseline for governments as well as private sector to be looking at. Now then, each country could have a separate light touch regulation in terms of what's good, right? Which means, do you regulate data at the source, assuming you're building out your own country's LLM and you're going to train it? I would think you probably train it on Llama 3, I would think, because that has a capacity to train it, and you fine-tune your local LLM internally with your sovereign cloud, right? Then you can regulate based on that standards, global standards, you have that already. And the data that's going in to train this, you have to look at your bias, your cultural bias, your gender bias, whatever else, you fine-tune that model according to the local standards that you set for your AI, which means like the Belchley Declaration or the Belchley Park Declaration, you would have, I would suppose, a safety institute, or what some people would say, why say safety? It's not risk, it's an opportunity institute. I don't know, an AI opportunity institute rather than safety. And you put in your guardrails, right? Your framework in terms of how you want to fine-tune your data for your sovereign AI, right?
And sorry to cut you off there, but it's an important point you raised, and there were only a few minutes, and I just wanted to get thoughts on one other topic, but a really, really important issue that you raised there, particularly around looking at the advantage of having more countries building their own AI would help with knowledge sharing. We heard yesterday about the UAE firm G42 and their development of a Hindi large language model. So that knowledge sharing and the democratization of the technology and the open source element of it, very, very important as well. And apologies to cut you off. I just wanted the final question. I'll start with you, Taha, and then finish with Her Excellency. Sustainability is great, signing these deals for billions of dollars worth of data centers, but it's having an impact on the planet. The World Economic Forum saying the computational power required to keep up with AI's pace is going to double every 100 days. How do we fix that issue, do you think?
I'm not sure if it would fix that issue, but I would say that one of the, perhaps the AI hunger for power, if anything, it will just make it even more relevant to invest in greener alternatives, because there's no way you can actually scale and reach the level of energy that's necessary if you keep relying on some of the fossil fuel or some of the more traditional ways of doing it. For the way I see, if anything, we've just given another incentive to the world to go, well, look back again at geothermal, look back again at what you can do with regards to harnessing perhaps some of the kinetic energy that you can get out of some of the prototypes for generating energy out of the motions of water in some of the oceans, and harnessing any kind of source of energy that will let you creatively be able to meet those requirements without necessarily impacting the quality of life. Because if you end up with, sure, a great AI data center, and let's say an AI park, but it's so filled with smog that nobody can breathe and nobody wants to live around it, you haven't really achieved much, right? There's not going to be any convincing your population about the benefits of AI if they wake up in the morning and there's more cases of asthma and all of these issues that are inherent with poor air quality. And therefore the way I see it, sure, there's always two sides of any argument, but if anything, AI has probably given the world one of the best reasons to actively pursue some of the more sustainable and some of the greener ways to achieve high levels of sustainable energy, so that they can power up this revolution without necessarily causing more harm to their populations.
Yeah, essentially, it may be part of the solution as well. Is that what you're hoping in the Kingdom's perspective, Your Excellency? How important is sustainability in your plans? You mentioned data centers were one area that you're looking at, allowing companies to build data centers. Given that you're in the infancy of your plans, how much is climate change and sustainability featuring in those plans?
It features greatly, and that's the advantage of coming later into the game, is that we're really focused on ensuring that everything that we're doing is green. I mean, we've had various discussions with our head of state, His Majesty, to say whatever we're doing, we do not want to be able to affect future generations. We're very much a long culture of people, so we really respect to be able to give those coming ahead of us the same advantages, the same health care, and be able to ensure that they do not, because of our decisions for economic economic growth suffer consequences down the line. So anything that we're doing in this particular space and focusing on data centers being our focal growth area will always be done green. You know, we have power right now, we have immense power, and we want to be able to have more power so that we are prepared for what's to come and what's coming. But everything must be done in a way that is green, and everything must be done in a way that doesn't change, you know, the structure and the value and the quality of life of those who come, you know, ahead of us.
Brilliant, thank you. And particularly with young populations in so many countries, including your own, it's something that should be front and center, many would argue. But I think that brings up our time. It's flown by. Thank you so much to all my panelists, Your Excellency Savannah Maziya, the Minister of ICT from the Kingdom of Eswatini. Next to her is Taha Benssiba, Head of AI for Europe, South, Middle East and Africa at Oral, and Raymond, Siva, the Senior Vice President, Head of the Digital Investment Office at the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. Lots we covered there, from regulation to ethics, sustainability, and the importance of sovereign AI. And thank you very much for your attention. Thanks.
Thank you.